Hey guys, welcome back to Andy's Dinosaur Reviews, and today we are going to check out another Jurassic World Dominion release. We've got another Mattel Ferocious Pack figure here, as we've got the Einiosaurus, and this is a brand new ceratopsian to enter the Mattel line, which is really quite exciting. They've been actually giving us a few different pretty cool ceratopsians over the last few years, and this one honestly would probably be one of the most, I would say, obscure they've released, because it's an Einiosaurus. Like, we really don't have very many figures of that species, so Mattel, as per usual, giving us some pretty cool, very unexpected species. And the figure does actually look pretty nice, though I will say that the original prototype images I had seen of it, I kind of liked a little better, because I think it was more of like a really dark tone rather than the light bluish tone that we have here, and I felt like the darker tones look cooler on it, but it still doesn't look bad by any means. And you can see, as far as the packaging goes, it's pretty much the standard as far as what we usually get with this line. And then you can see, as far as the other figures that are in this wave, we've got ourselves the Einiosaurus. We also have a brand new version of the Moros Intrepidus. We've also got an Atrociraptor, which is very similar to a previously released version in the Owen Escape set. And then we've also got a reddish Velociraptor. So some pretty cool figures this time around. So without further ado, let's go ahead, pop this out of the package, and jump straight to a closer look at it right now. So starting up here at the head sculpt of our Einiosaurus, you can see that it is really nicely done, actually, like quite a bit nicer than I was expecting it to be, which is kind of odd to say that, because Mattel usually always delivers a really good sculpt, but from the images that I had seen, I just wasn't as impressed with this one as I honestly think I am currently. The detailing as far as the skin texture goes looks really good. You have a combination of like some scales and all sorts of different varying types of skin texture, it seems, because we kind of have like skin wrinkles and stuff down here in the snout, but you can see we have larger scales there up above the eye. You also have some clusters of smaller scales here in front of the nostrils, and it looks really neat the way that they've sculpted all of that out. You can also see there's some very nice looking detailing here, some very fine detail in the beak of the Einiosaurus, and of course that classic Einiosaurus horn looks great, and we've got lots of really nice kind of cracks and crevices and detail within that area as well. The entire upper half of our ceratopsian has a nice dark bluish tone, and you can see that bluish tone does lead out into the horn, but it does transition to a brown quite smoothly there out toward the tip of that horn. We do have yellow eyes and a black pupil, actually, which is something we don't always get, so that's definitely a plus for this figure. As you lead up here into the frill, you can start to see much larger scales leading up here. You can see that the detailing within the spikes and stuff and horns that run along the frill also look really good. Gorgeous looking, very vibrant detail on this Einiosaurus. And you can see that the dark bluish tone continues up here into the frill, but we have kind of like a little cluster of splotchy yellow and brown right there. Similar brown, actually, to what you see at the tip of the horn. And that looks pretty cool. Same thing for this side. The eye paint looks pretty good for the most part. It's a little bit sloppy on this side, but not too far off, which is pretty nice to see. And then you can see the back of the frill also sports some nice scale detail. As you lead down here into the lower jaw, you can see that we now have a lighter blue, which is a strong majority of the figure as far as that light bluish tone goes. But you can see some more nice looking skin texture there as well. As you lead back into the neck, you have a bunch of creasing and stuff there on the underside of the neck and the throat region. Moving back a little further, you continue to see some more nice looking skin texture within the shoulder area, but you can kind of make out the shoulder blade itself. Beautiful muscle definition leading down the leg. You've got a pretty nice looking foot sculpt with some kind of scoots running down the front of the toes. No nail paint as per usual. It kind of looks like it might have a little bit of a gloss coat though, which is nice to see. I like the positioning of this leg, how it comes out and then just kind of is planted. Looks like it's kind of in the process of taking a step, which looks pretty neat. As you lead up here, you can kind of make out the rib cage of the Einiosaurus, and a fairly smooth transition from that light blue to that kind of, it's like a yellowish green color that they have here for the underside. And the transition, even though it kind of looks a little bit abrupt, is sort of smooth at the same time. You can also see that the underside has some gorgeous looking detail, and you can also kind of pick out the bluish tones here on the underside, sort of creeping through some of that lighter tone of color. If you look up here on the top, this is one thing that I wasn't a huge fan of when I initially had seen this figure, and that's the type of like armored look that we have for the back of the Einiosaurus, which is very interesting to have that type of a look on the back of this ceratopsian. but it honestly doesn't look as bad here in hand as I was expecting it to. I thought it was going to be kind of off-putting as far as the figure goes, but somehow it actually looks pretty neat here in person, so that is definitely a plus. You can see kind of like some scoots running along the back of the Einiosaurus in two different areas, and then also kind of running down along the spinal column, and of course the same thing on the opposing side. As you lead down here into the thigh, you can see how that light blue kind of splotches and stripes down, kind of designs down into the lighter tone. You've also got some more nice muscle definition, a few osteoderms and stuff there on the top of the thigh as well. You've got the kneecap right there, nice muscle definition in the calf. Pretty nice looking rear foot sculpt as well. Yet again, no painted nails, but it almost sort of kind of looks like there might be a gloss coat. It's just a little hard to tell. You can see that that light coloration does end here in the pelvic region before transitioning entirely to the blue that leads out the rest of the figure. And we have a nice looking tail here as we lead out. Looks pretty good. It's not in any type of like a crazy curve. It's almost straightforward, but you can see it leads up and then slightly bends down, but not really any type of like a dramatic curve. You don't really see too much difference over here on this side compared to the initial side, of course, except for the difference in the leg positioning, which I don't know that I actually have them perfectly. I'll have to wait till I actually get them down on the ground to take a look at exactly how different they are, but you can definitely see, especially with the front left leg, that the leg is trailing, whereas the opposing leg obviously has just taken a step forward. And this side, I would think, maybe like this. This leg, for some reason, just wants to keep going up. Like every time I move it, it just kind of, oh, there it stopped, but it kind of shoots right back up to where it was. But again, it does look really good over here, just like it did on the initial side. And although there's not too much as far as, coloration goes, what we have here does look pretty good because we have like variation of color pretty much through the entire body aside from the tail. So they did do a pretty decent job, I think, on the paint job of this one. Of course, a little more paint, like the painted beak and maybe the spikes and stuff, the horns running along the frill could have been nice, but it's still a pretty decent looking paint job and a fairly fun looking Einiosaurus figure as a whole. Definitely like this guy a lot more than I thought I would. As far as articulation goes on the Einiosaurus, you have the neck articulation, so it can go up very nicely. It can go down, but not too far. That's about as far as down as it goes. It can also swivel if you'd like to do that, so that gives you some more posability options. You can't look left or right, though, of course. You can see that we also have leg articulation forward and back. I didn't think they'd go out away from the body, especially on a Ferocious Pack figure. Same deal for the leg articulation on the rear legs. They definitely don't go out away from the body. And then, of course, a swivel tail, as you always have when it comes to Mattel. And also, the Jurassic Facts app code, if you would like to add this one to your collection. There you go. You've got the code right there. Of course, we still have that obnoxious-looking spot on the top of the figure for the code. I really wish they'd go back to just having it on the feet. I mean, I get why they do it, because you're extracting the DNA from the figure, from the dinosaur, but it just would be cooler if they'd just not have that on the top. But as far as a size goes, from the tip of the horn to the tail, you were looking at about 7 1/4 inches, or around 18.5 centimeters. Now I knocked it over. And then for a height to the top of the horn here, about 3.5 inches or 9 centimeters. For a size comparison, there is Mr. Papo T-Rex, the Attack Pack Colovosaurus, and Robert Muldoon from the Mattel Jurassic World toy line. And that Colovosaurus is currently taking a horn straight to the throat, but you can definitely see that as far as the Einiosaurus goes here, it's definitely within the normal Ferocious Pack, Attack Pack size range. It's not really any different as far as the size goes. But for another comparison, there is the Extreme Damage Velociraptor, a figure that I often bring in for review comparisons because a raptor from Mattel is pretty much the same size as every other raptor outside of the Amber collection from Mattel. So most people, if you are a collector of the Mattel line, would probably have a Velociraptor. So I always feel like this one's a really good one to bring in for a comparison. But for one more comparison, and just so we can see two Ceratopsians from Mattel here next to each other, we've got the Hammond Collection Triceratops next to our Einiosaurus, the Ferocious Pack version. And you can definitely see there is a drastic size difference between these two. As you would expect, being a Ferocious Pack figure, it is definitely on the smaller side. So this brand new Mattel Jurassic World Dominion Ferocious Pack Einiosaurus is a pretty cool figure. I actually like it a lot more than I was expecting to. It's definitely a very welcome ceratopsian into the Mattel line, one that I absolutely would not have expected Mattel to make, but they continue to surprise me all the time by releasing really, really cool, very obscure species. And although Einiosaurus isn't all that obscure, when it comes to a Jurassic Park or Jurassic World toy line, I feel like it's pretty obscure. It's the type of figure you wouldn't expect to get made, but they did make it, and they've done a pretty good job on it as a whole. Again, the one thing that I was most worried about, I think, was that kind of armored look to the back of the figure. I was just concerned at how weird it could look in person, but having it here, it actually doesn't look quite as off-putting as I was expecting. I still would have preferred the figure to have more of like that classic ceratopsian look to the back, but it does still look pretty decent on this one, and you can always accept this as like, being a little bit different than your average ceratopsian or your average Einiosaurus, just because Jurassic World dinosaurs are never full-blooded dinosaurs. They're always kind of hybrids in a way because they have DNA from other animals in their genetic codes, so the Einiosaurus can have a slightly different look, and it's okay. But at the same time, again, I still think they did a pretty good job on the sculpt. It's very highly detailed, incredibly vibrant, and crisp detail throughout. I think the head sculpt might be a little bit too large, but it still as a whole looks pretty nice as far as the detailing goes. The paint job also looks pretty nice. I'm a pretty big fan of what I see here from the paint job, even though the tones of color may not be the most naturalistic for a ceratopsian. It still looks pretty good as a whole, and there's quite a bit of color variation included, as we have a dark blue, a lighter blue, that kind of yellowish green type color, and then you also have yellow in the frill and also brown on the figure, and then of course yellow eyes. So there's a good bit of color on this one. It could have looked a little bit better if we had, again, painted some things like the beak or the horns and of course the nails, but for a Mattel figure, it does have a pretty decent and fairly fun looking paint job. Outside of that, though, the only thing you really have is articulation, which works pretty nicely. Not great, but still fairly smoothly. With these Ferocious Pack figures, you never have like an action feature or anything like that, so nothing to worry about when it comes to that aspect. But as a whole, again, it is a pretty nice looking Ferocious Pack figure, and definitely one that I recommend picking up. So if you are interested in this, make sure you head to your local Walmart or Target, as it should be showing up in both of those places. Grab yourself this Einiosaurus if you can find it, and make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next review. Thanks for watching.